is art. Alright. To further explore the notion of art, as per many recommendations, I dove into the writings of Allan Kaprow as contained within the collection Essays on the Blurring of Art and Life. Within these essays, the evolution of Kaprow's understanding is documented. I feel that Kaprow has eloquently described many things I've been struggling to articulate, and I'm thankful for his writings that I will not have to try to reinvent the wheel. Throughout history, as terms have been co-opted to mean things they never should have, those who are set by the change have sought out new terms. Art does not seem to do that. Though segments of artists have come up with more and more specific adjectives to describe the kind of art they're making, no one has seemed to give up the term art entirely. Kaprow experiences co-opting of the term happenings by larger society, which essentially rendered the term meaningless. He wrote an essay pinpointing happenings in order to clarify. He distinguished that a conventional situation as it is not a happening. But a happening is distinguished by actually assigning, or perhaps just mentally assigning, a situation a new or multiple set of functions. If we say a happening is everything, or if we say that art is everything, then we can say either is nothing. Thus, the search for a fuller understanding of the term is common. As an art educator with a background in art history, my appreciation for what is considered art is wide. But how can I understand my With Hands project, Duchamp's Fountain, Acconci's Seedbed, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, Smithson's Monuments of Passaic, and Donovan's Untitled Plastic Cups as all parts of the same thing? The meaning of art is elusive. As one approximates understanding, one realizes just how little he or she actually knows about its nature. Kaprow quotes Hans Hoffman as saying, "You can't teach art at all, but you can teach directions to it, methods, and exercises." I feel strongly that this is true. When I substitute teach, I often hear high school students complaining about the assignment their art teacher left for them. I can often see the skill or perception the assignment is meant to teach them. But by a class being titled art, the students feel that they should be creating art, or at least have the freedom to create whatever they wish. The purpose of art classes is to equip students with the tools, technical skills, and mental framework they may need to better do so, and I often try to explain this. When I teach art, I like giving students a survey to get better acquainted with their perceptions and experiences. I always include the seemingly simple question, what is art? At a younger age, this question does not seem to faze the answerer. One-sentence responses including the words beautiful and picture abound. Beauty is subjective, and certainly at this point very few consider art limited to pictures. Anyone with a background in art history is familiar with the fact that art as we understand it today has only existed for a short period of time. Much of what we consider art before this time was created to serve a function, to decorate, to educate, to be a prop in a religious ritual. Many times, the person or persons creating those works was not the same as the person conjuring them up. Though we often credit the craftspeople of old with these works, we accept the early works of John Baldessari, in which he hired a sign painter to paint phrases onto canvases, as just that. The early work of John Baldessari. Who is the artist? Where is the art located? Is it in the commission or in the creation? This all, of course, depends on how we pinpoint art. At an older age, especially among those who consider themselves cultured, it is widely accepted that things on display within museums and galleries are art. Vito Acconci's Seedbed occurred inside a gallery. Seedbed was a piece in which Acconci lay, masturbating, beneath a fake floor, over which gallery-goers would walk, his noises and comments about them being projected for them to hear. Though surely this piece was troubling for some, many others accepted its artness. Would they have accepted it as readily if it had occurred somewhere else? In a grocery store, say? Perhaps Acconci would not have been appreciated as an artist in that venue, his actions subject to sexual harassment charges or worse. Marcel Duchamp has done a ton to challenge the structure of the art world, and to challenge our notions of art. In Allan Kaprow's essay, Dr. M.D., he discusses the implication of Duchamp's ready-mades, factory-produced objects submitted to galleries by Duchamp as his art. Kaprow says, "If simply calling a snow shovel a work of art makes it that, the same goes for all of New York City, or the Vietnam War, or a pedantic article on Marcel Duchamp." Kaprow later clarifies that Duchamp's initial move of making something previously non-art into art by placing it in an art context was sharply ironic, confronting the viewer with a whole set of questions about the nature of art. Though a similarly ready-made non-art object placed within an art context these days might still indicate that such an object is art, it does not cause quite the stir it once did. The effect has been trivialized. Simply because something is art does not mean it's worthwhile. It is the framing that helps many to identify objects and events as art. From an actual frame to art venues like galleries and museums and theaters, and the conceptual framework that is labeling something with art terms, such as performance, poetry, painting, and even art, that which these frames present is accepted by many as art. This has been useful as people, like Duchamp and Acconci, begin to work more and more in ways not as yet associated with art. As Kaprow tells in his essay, Non-Theatrical Performance, the framework tells what you are to make of a thing. A cow in a concert hall is a musician. A cow in a barn is a cow. A man watching the musician cow is an audience. A man in the cow barn is a farmer. Right? This example serves to challenge the notion of contextual framework as the single identifier in art. Kavett, Perpetual Motion, in a video blog titled "Are Vlogs Art?" questions whether the context is truly what makes something art. She does so by discussing whether vlogs, as they are typically presented on YouTube, would be more art if they were presented inside a gallery. Is one to believe that anything occurring outside of these frames is not necessarily art? Outside of art being created, removed from the art world, many times discovered by some agent of the art world, and then transported into galleries, is largely appreciated as art. Was this work not art before it was placed within this frame? The frame is certainly not a neutral device. Its very existence changes the work that it presents. I've noticed that when I want to record an experience, perhaps with writing, photography, or video, doing so alters my experience, as it removes me from the experience in a way that I would otherwise be engaged. I often find myself in a high-up place with a beautiful view, snapping a million pictures to try to take home a piece of the experience. I am always disappointed when I get home. The photos never do the original justice. The experience through the frame is different than the experience. Different frames change how an experience is perceived. A performance in someone's house is different than a performance on the street, which are both different than that same performance in a theater. What if placing an artwork within an art context removes the soul of the piece? What if placing an artwork in an art context essentially nullifies it? Can it still be art in a non-art context? Kaprow found this problem with participatory art in exhibition contexts. The participation is hindered or changed because the participants are aware that they're being watched, and thus do not act as they would otherwise. He found that institutions framework that is essentially situated in life, right out of life, into art. Though I would not feel comfortable saying that art can exist without any frame whatsoever. Even simply paying attention to something is a frame. And as Kaprow notes in his essay, The Meaning of Life, that attention cannot help but change what it is paying attention to. He also notes that when a participant is helping to create a piece, he or she is also watching, paying attention, and mentally framing the work. Beyond a physical or otherwise identified work, Kaprow mentions a kind of work in which something, anything, is considered within the frame of high art. But this contextualization does not venture further than the mind in which it is conceived. In this way, among the people that have the mental command of art, nearly anything can be framed to be art. Kaprow suggests that even murder, unethical as it may be, could be an admissible artistic proposition. Certainly, I am not elitist enough to believe that something can only become art when associated by or with people or other frameworks that are previously connected with art. In this way, with a sort of nepotism dominating the art world, art would be very limited. I don't believe that making art is limited to those who are aware that they are doing so. And while I do believe that anything can be art, that does not mean that everything is art. BandGeek 8408. Matt Guion, in a video blog titled Vlogging is Art, states that art is something you present. I like this notion, but I feel that the verb present is not specific enough to define art. I have, in the past, felt that art was something presented with the intent of changing someone's view, influencing the way someone considers the world, showing someone something they may as yet not have seen. I see that this is also limiting, in that it requires an audience outside of oneself for something to be art. Was the dance of Kaprow's elbow, that he observed while brushing his teeth, not art until he shared it? I certainly don't believe so. Kaprow so eloquently, though he himself referred to it as mouthful, stated a supposition for what art is. And it incorporates everything I was attempting to articulate and include, that instead of trying to come up with something else on my own, I'm simply going to agree with him. He said, art is a weaving of meaning-making activity with any or all parts of our lives. He elaborated that this statement included two characteristics of art, which indeed set art apart from that which is not art for me. That art is interpretive and done purposively. I've often said that the question, so what, can be asked of art. This question, of course, seeks the meaning of a piece. Though I may not know the meaning Donovan had in mind as she stacked thousands of clear plastic cups together in stacks of variable height to create an undulating landscape, I know that it brings certain things to mind for me. These may be questions of waste, preciousness, maybe nature. It is widely recorded that Duchamp's Fountain, a urinal signed with R. Mutt 1917, was submitted to challenge many notions about art itself and the gallery system. Perhaps in the case of the sign painter, commissioned by Baldessari, or Michaelangelo, commissioned to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, both the one giving and fulfilling the commission were the artists, as the ones giving the commission were weaving meaning-making into their purchases by dictating it so, and the ones fulfilling it could have been weaving meaning-making into the way they fulfilled this. If they're just doing a job, then the lack of significance, I believe, identifies that, for them, the piece is not art. There's also the topic of works which function as art as well as some other thing. Kaprow recalls an event put together by Abbie Hoffman, in which he and a group of friends went to the observation balcony of the New York Stock Exchange,